Hello, sleepy heads. Tonight, the candle burns in a quieter corner of Rome. Not in a senator's hall or a soldier's camp, but in the narrow rooms where trade is measured not in marble, but in whispers, coin, and the rhythm of footsteps on worn stone. There's no festival here, no grand procession, just a street that knows the sound of curtains shifting, the smell of oil lamps, and the tired laughter of neighbors who barter time as much as goods. Behind those painted doors, life follows its own steady clock. If these gentle histories ease your night, a soft like or a small subscribe is more than enough. A nod that carries far in the still hours. And if you'd like, leave a quiet word in the comments, so this room of strangers feels a little more familiar. Now, dim the screen, slow your breathing, and imagine the hush of a city settling down. We'll walk together through rooms where work, survival, and companionship blend in the low light, where the night keeps its secrets, and history speaks softly if you let it. The street narrows before it tells the truth, and the truth is a low lintel teaching voices to fold smaller than stone. Step in, let the threshold take the weight from the day. The air tightens first, as if these walls practiced one breath for 2,000 years and never quite exhaled. An oil lamp thinks aloud from a clay lip, brass-throated and steady, leaving a smoke petal above it for the ceiling to keep. No atrium to catch the sky here, only a corridor and 10 doors that promise less than the city outside, and deliver exactly what was asked. As the lamp's circle settles around the plaster, notice how sound agrees to travel softly. How your shoulders remember the size of rooms designed to be enough and not more. The hallway runs like a vein. Your step finds the vocabulary the floor already knows. Hurried, hesitant, habitual. 5 rooms at ground level, 5 more above. A vertical neighborhood that climbs. 1 staircase and stops where the ceiling insists. You pass a doorway. The air changes the way it does when rooms remember they are separate. Here, the cells are deliberate. Each masonry bed is an elevated decision. Stone cut to the width of a body and a plan. Once dressed in straw and cloth that pretended to be softness until the lamp went out. If you rest a palm on the ledge, you'll feel how stone keeps its temperature like a ledger keeps its sums. Impartial, exact. The plaster keeps its color, like a secret that faded with routine, not shame. Above one door, a painted scene. Bodies simplified into verbs, gestures into angles. It isn't a menu so much as a language the eye already speaks. Stand beneath it, and you'll see how the wall does the talking when words are either too much or not welcome. Elsewhere, Priapus waits at a threshold, a grin carved for daylight, a joke blunt enough to pass for directions. If you linger, scandal becomes infrastructure, images acting as signposts where reading falters. Discretion whispering where prices once followed. The paint's persistence is a kind of politeness. It makes the hallway a place instead of a tunnel. Listen a moment. The room has an acoustic for whispers. Sound moves along stone like water, turning corners as if taught. A cough goes farther than a promise. The ceiling remembers each wick that burned here. Soot blossoms into rosettes where flame meets lime and leaves a biography in black. Stand by the masonry bed and watch the lamp teach shadows how to behave. Shade lays itself along the ledge, climbs the wall, and pauses at painted hips that have stood their post longer than any doorkeeper. The light doesn't flicker. It considers, and the room thinks with it, slow and steady. The corridor bends its elbow where the air cools. Somewhere near, a latrine once taught the plan to be practical. Buildings like this are honest about traffic. One mouth for entering, one for leaving, so faces can avoid each other without insult. And the street can keep pretending commerce is always elsewhere. When you turn, you'll feel how the draft chooses the back way first. A door to the lane, another to the rear, and a staircase tight as a secret carrying your feet to the upper rooms. Privacy here is a smaller ceiling and a lamp that takes longer to find the corners. The climb is short, the compromise familiar. Graffiti salt the plaster in quick cuts. A nation of handwriting with borders made of impulse. Prices here, names there, a boast bitten into a joke that still draws a smile. If you lean near the script, the wall begins to sound like a crowd that's just stepped outside together. Athenae, 2 asses. Sabina, 2 asses. A kiss priced like bread. Brief, filling enough to continue. These scratches look careless, but they hold weather. The weather of wages, of appetite, of evenings that ended as predicted and paid as agreed. You can read with your fingertips. The letters are shallow but insistent. Outside, daylight points bluntly, a phallus set into paving, half warning, half charm, sometimes read as a signpost, sometimes only as protection against the evil eye. Inside, the walls prefer wrists and hips as their arrows. Walk back to the doorway and let the streets. Noise carry in as far as the threshold allows. It stops like a visitor who knows when to leave. The corner knows more names than any poet. Close to the forum, within earshot of the baths, caught in the crosswind of errands and appetites. This address required no advertisement louder than routine. If your feet found it now, they would be repeating the city's oldest directions. Turn here, then here, and do not linger at the door. Inside again, the measure holds. A cell the size of an afternoon. A bed the width of a decision. A shelf where a jar once waited for oil. And a cup for a mouth not thirsty for water. Step across the threshold and feel the floor know. The difference between hesitation and urgency without judging either. The hinges, when there were hinges, learned to be quieter than people. You open a door and it breathes rather than speaks. The room receives you with exactly the attention you brought to it. No more, no less. Your eyes adjust at the hall's end. A fresco reads as instruction even after the colors have gone shy. Scholars will argue whether these are advertisements or a kind of mural literacy. The wall prefers utility to thesis. Here, pictures stand where words cannot linger. Above, the ghost of a balcony once traced the upper corridor. Imagine a railing, a bit of wood, the smallest complaint a step can make. Down here, stone does as stone does. Up there, wood did as wood does, creaked, took sides, and eventually forgot. When you look up, the ceiling answers with its soot constellations. In a corner, an alcove, a recess for a small god or for habit itself. A lamp could sit there while hands attended other economies. The soot around it rings the niche-like growth lines in a tree. Each dark petal a night added to a season that never ends. Stand close, and the smell arranges itself for you. Oil first, then sweat, then lime wash, then a salt that tastes like leaving. If there was a mercy here, it was practical. Warm water in a bowl, a cloth folded clean, the rhythm of refilling wicks. You can picture the errands, the quick walk to the fountain, the slosh back along the lane, the way the vessel's rim learned the curve of a wrist. The architecture refuses camouflage. No courtyards to pretend its gentility. No curving corridors to confuse the hour. Rooms front the hallway like teeth. Each door a mouth that learned to close at the right time. If you pause midway, you can feel the building hold its grammar around you. The beds are masonry because stone doesn't argue with labor. No squeal, no splinter, no memory. What softness there was came from cushions and cloth. The only luxuries permitted to be fragile. Brush the ledge and you'll know how thoroughly stone minds its own business. Look for color where the city preferred it to blush, and you'll find it anyway. Cinnabar that kept its red, ochre its warmth, charcoal its line. Even the plaster wants to be a storyteller once the lamps are confident. On one panel, an ankle turns. On another, a hand waits in the place where money will later pass. The art here chooses clarity over beauty. Ambiguity is too expensive to keep on the wall in a house that sells time by the handful. Stand back, and the hallway becomes legible in a single glance. Step to the threshold again. The street presses into the frame like a tide. Carts and feet make a city feel inevitable. Rome names everything it owns a necessity, and everything it disapproves a rumor. This house learned to be both. Here, rumor has walls and images that do not avert their eyes. Necessity speaks sotto voce, with curtains and coins. The stones haven't learned shame. Shame is a human fabric, and there isn't much fabric here to begin with. You can leave, and the doorway will close the world like a lid on a jar. Upstairs, the quiet is nearer the roof and nearer Wood's argument with weight. They called those rooms private, meaning the lamp needed more time to find the corners, and the door caught on the same. Grain every evening. Climb halfway and listen. Privacy sounds like a pause held just long enough. The staircase delivers you to a repetition. Same dimensions. New vantage. The arithmetic of evenings counted in oil and ash. Place your hand on the rail that isn't there anymore, and you'll understand what the building has chosen to remember, and what it has chosen to forget. Between doorways, the wall is tattooed with small talk that outlasted tongues. Names of workers in the mouths of clients. Names of clients in the mouth of time. Prices that hold until they don't. 2 asses for an afternoon's forgetfulness. More when the bath's let out and the street is generous. The ratios make sense to anyone who has haggled with hunger. Bread has a price. So does the hour it takes to stop thinking about bread. Trace a letter and you'll feel the math in the plaster. The brothel isn't large. It is exactly its purpose. A place to arrive, not to visit. A place to leave, not to linger. If you stand still, the house divides into microclimates. A cool draft at the stair, warmth by the lamp niche. A held breath quiet behind a closed curtain. Your body reads these weathers the way a sailor reads a sky. Near the entrance, the floor's echo changes. Worn mortar translates public noise into private business. Outside, a marker in stone points like a blunt finger. Inside, a painted wrist points with equal candor. The building meets both kinds of instruction in the middle and calls it practice. Stand in the corridor's center and let the rooms align like vertebrae. Each cell holds a story that ends when the wick does. If there's a shrine here, it's the practical kind. A shelf that remembers a cup. A hook that remembers a garment. A floor that remembers knees without requiring names. The place is not tragic or romantic. It is exact. It explains nothing, confesses nothing, offers a setting and waits while the city supplies the cast. The coin, the hour, the exit. When you turn to go, the lamp will keep its amber circle on the plaster, and the fresco will look past your shoulder with its usual patience. Step out. The lane tastes cooler, less salted by breath, more seasoned with ash and market dust. The chorus of the city gathers itself again. Tomorrow, this corridor will measure the same footsteps. The ceiling will grow another soot flower, and the stones will pretend not to notice how little anything changes here when everything else does. If you glance back just once, the doorway will look smaller than it felt, and the night will keep the secret the building taught it, that some trades survive by not raising their voices, and some rooms become history by refusing to become stories. Night edits the lane into simpler shapes. Wheel ruts become shadow, vendor calls become murmur, and the mule's slow clop becomes a rhythm the lamps seem to remember. Pause at the doorway, and you can feel the building breathe. The hinge as a lung, the corridor as a throat, the rooms as patient chambers that know how to hold a breath and release it without a sound. When you step inside again, the last circle has drawn a little tighter, conserving itself. The soot flower above it opening another dark petal the way a tree adds a ring. Stone keeps the day's heat the way a ledger keeps its sums. Impartial, exact, never sentimental about what paid for the warmth. Upstairs, listen before you climb. Wood speaks. Its language of complaint and compliance in equal parts. Each footfall answers back. Then the quiet rearranges itself as if it has a right to the space. The 5 rooms above measure privacy mostly by distance from the street. Sometimes a door is only a curtain. Sometimes the curtain only a suggestion. Down below, the walls have been thickened by habit. Discretion has a weight here, and Mortar learned it long ago. When you move, the corridor receives your step like an agreement already signed, already filed, ready to be forgotten by morning. This building was built for circulation. One mouth for entering, one for leaving. The plan offers faces a way to miss each other without anyone losing dignity. Walk from front to back and the draft favors. Your shoulder blades as if guiding you out, not in. Gossip tires when it has to walk the long way. The painted scenes refuse to brighten for the sake of attention. They prefer to endure. Reds and ochres, shoulders and wrists, a grammar of the body distilled to verbs. Stand beneath a panel and you're reading without realizing. The wall keeps the lesson short, the way a teacher respects a crowded day. It's easy to mistake the images for spectacle. Stay a minute and they turn into signage. Where literacy wavers, pictures keep their promises. Here, clarity outranks beauty, because time is sold by the handful. You can feel how the paint makes a hallway into a place, not a tunnel. The scratched words do a different job. Lean close, and the plaster is a market of voices. Names called out. Prices fixed. Boasts sharpened and left to sting. Your fingertip can read the letters almost as well as your eyes. The depth tells you who carved in haste and who wanted to be remembered. Julie, 2 asses. Krista, 2 asses. A kiss priced like a crust. Brief, enough to keep moving. You can hear their laughter if you listen for it. Not because the wall remembers sound, but because it remembers speed, the quickness of a decision, the sudden ease of a bargain completed. Whether you read the street's phallic markers as directions or as protective charms. Daylight is blunt. Night is candid. Step to the lip of the lane, and the city's noise stops at your shins as, if obeying a rule older than bylaws. Walk back inside and the lights switch back to pictures that point without pointing. Location does half the work. Near the forum, within earshot of the baths, crossed by errands and appetites addresses like this don't need announcements. If your feet have arrived, they are repeating a path the city already recommended. Turning where others turned. Pausing where others pretended not to. Count again. If it helps you trust the place. 5 below, 5 above. 10 cells, 10 masonry beds. 10 circles of light that can be made wider or smaller at the turn of a pinched wick. If names fall off first and paint fades later, stone is what remains when even memory grows tired. Look up. The soot constellations can't be charted, but they do a kind of navigation anyway. Each dark petal is a night accrued, each ring a shift concluded. You can almost hear the lamp's soft sizzle and the wall's warm reply. The contract between them is older than anyone who ever tried to forbid it. If there is a place for keeping watch, the plan betrays it. A corner with both entrances in view. An accident of sightlines that isn't an accident. Stand there, and the building arranges itself around your gaze. Authority here is measured in angles, not furniture. Coins have taught this counter their weight without needing a ledger. The sums can live in a head, and the room still knows how bodies move when they're about to pay. When they've already paid. When they wish they hadn't. Your own posture answers the architecture even when you don't mean it to. The upstairs lights are less about privacy than about patience. Small openings borrow daylight without lending secrets. Bars teach the air to behave. From the lane, the house seems quieter than it feels inside. From inside, the lane seems louder than anyone will admit. Doors may be curtains, or doors that learned to behave like curtains. Here, sound is the only reliable lock. A voice lowered to a register. The plaster won't carry. A cough that stops at the jam. A laugh that resigned itself to being overheard and therefore harms no one. Honesty is built into the plan. No courtyards to pretend at leisure. No serpentine hall to make a game of arrival. The corridor is a sentence. Rooms, clauses. The staircase, a soft conjunction that connects above to below without pretending they are separate stories. The floor narrates in textures, smooth where waiting stands, rough where decisions happen, chipped where a heel always pauses before a turn. If the lamps failed, your feet could still read their way out. If you're looking for a god, look for a niche that could hold one small enough to keep his counsel. This is a house that asks the divine for maintenance, not miracles. Keep the lamp from spilling, the coin from failing, the door from learning the wrong names. Rome's pantheon has always shared space with commerce. A pinch of incense, a sweet fig torn open, a nod toward fortune. Ritual here is another form of architecture, placed so the eye won't trip. You can feel where offerings once stood, by the way the plaster's tone shifts under the soot. Graffiti continue to arrive after the hands are gone. They layer like dusk on dusk. The names that were urgent one night retire to make room for new urgencies. Some letters are pressed deep as if time itself were being carved. Others are brushed light, intended to live only as long as one glance. A price etched beside a doorway is less a negotiation than punctuation. 2 asses, 4. 8 when the bath crowds spill and coins come out warm. The war writes to market time, faster after payday, slower when weather keeps men home. When a flame is pinched, the room pulls back to its own breathing. The bed holds heat like a held word. The plaster keeps a shadow's outline as if it mattered, though by morning it won't. Stone doesn't dream, but it remembers positions the way rulers remember lines, as measurements only. Outside, the forum decants into lanes. Lanes pour into quiet, and quiet settles into thresholds. This house is a cistern for a certain kind of night. It collects, clarifies, and returns what the hour has no use for by dawn. You can almost hear the jars asking to be filled, the wicks asking to be trimmed. By day, the frescoes appear almost restrained. By night, the lamp gives them a stage, and their modesty turns into instruction. A wrist suggests a habit, a shoulder shows where the hour begins. A practiced angle of the back promises efficiency the plan will keep. That is this setting's last courtesy. It states in paint what the stone will ask of bodies. The house tells its truths twice. Once where you can see them, once where you can stand in them, and leaves the rest to the coin that completes the sentence. Stand at the threshold again, and let the lane draft across your ankles. Daylight's blunt signs and night's candid pictures reconcile inside this frame. Finding and being found are the same verb here. The building conjugates it without apology. Tomorrow the lamps will sizzle at the same clay lips. The ceiling will add another petal to its black bouquet, and the corridor will measure the same footsteps to the same doorways. You will leave no more mark than a warm palm on cool stone, and even that will fade by the time the first jar meets the first water of the day. The night has its errands, and this doorway learns each of them by sound. A cart slows, a mule snorts steam into the cooler air. Sandals test the rut, and the city lets its voices lower as if a rule were posted in a language only the stones can read. Linger at the sill and feel how the corridor receives that softened noise, admitting what it needs, refusing what it cannot use. Step in without hurry. The lamp's circle shrinks and warms, a practiced economy. Above it, the soot flower opens another silent petal, the ceiling's bouquet growing night. By night in a color that never needs tending, the room feels measured to the breath, neither generous nor stingy, as if generosity and stinginess were daytime words with no work here. If the building ever had a keeper's place, the sightlines tell on it. a corner that can see both mouths at once. Front and back, one eye for arrival, one eye for exit. Stand there, and the plan arranges itself around the gaze, as though authority were only the ability to hold a hallway in a single glance. Coins teach surfaces the way weather teaches stone. A counter can learn weight without a ledger, and a threshold can learn footfall without seeing a face. Your own posture edits itself for rooms like this. Shoulders decide to be smaller, hands decide to be quiet. Go on, up the stair that is now only an angle in the wall and a habit in the air. The second level repeats the first. 5 cells again. Privacy measured not by furniture, but by distance and the way light arrives. A small opening borrows day without lending secrets. The bar across it teaches the breeze to behave. If the upper rooms felt more private once, it was because time learned to hesitate on the climb. A curtain can be a door if the voice behind it knows how to stop at the cloth. A door can be a curtain if the hand on it has already lowered its volume. Back below, the fresco panels do not brighten to court you. They endure to instruct you. The bodies are simplified into their verbs. The verbs into angles readable in a heartbeat. You are not asked to admire, only to understand. A hallway becomes legible in a single glance. The image does the work a sentence would waste time doing. If you search their faces for individual stories, they will decline to answer. These are not portraits, but tools. Not a gallery, but an alphabet. They say what the room will ask of the body, and then they step aside so the room can ask it. The scratched words supply what paint will not. Names, numbers, opinions sharpened to a point that still pricks. Lean close and hear the pace, not the grammar. Fast when the baths let out, slower when the sky threatens rain. Some cuts are deep because the hand had time. Some are shallow because the hand did not. Athenae, 2 asses. Sabina, 2 asses. Lucius was here. Sabinus greeted Proclus. The wall reads like a market minute by minute, adjusting to coin as a baker adjusts a price to flour. If you trace a letter, your fingertip learns how long the writer wanted it to last. The plan declares its purpose without apology. No courtyard to pretend at leisure, and no scenic detours. Corridor as sentence, rooms as clauses. Stare as a conjunction that never changes its mind. You can stand in the middle and feel. The syntax settle around you like a well-used rule. Floors make their own map in texture, smooth where waiting stands, rough where decisions are made, chipped where a heel always pauses before turning. If the lamps failed, your feet would still know which way to go. If there is a niche, it is small enough that a god could keep his counsel there. The prayers that belong to such spaces are maintenance. Requests, keep the oil from spilling, the coin from failing, the door from attracting the wrong knock at the wrong hour. The soot rings around the recess make a calendar of evenings, legible without numbers. Rome's gods have always respected commerce. Their altars learn to fit where hands do not stumble. A torn fig, a pinch of incense, a murmur to fortune. The building accepts all 3 without needing to believe in any. Architecture is the most patient believer here. Night returns the lane to itself in waves. From the forum to the baths. From the baths to the corners with blunt markers hammered into stone. Symbols that are either arrows or amulets, depending on the daylight. and then into these small rooms where the city edits its voice. At the sill, the outside stops as if shod in felt. Inside, the house speaks both dialects at once. Images that point without pointing. Corners that accept without comment. Finding and being found share a verb here. The plan conjugates it without ornament. You count again, because counting is a way to trust. 5 below, 5 above. 10 masonry beds that never once splintered or squealed an opinion. Straw made the softness. Cloth made the pretense. The lamp made the circle within which pretense could proceed on schedule. Stone remembers nothing and so gives nothing away. If there is mercy in that, it is the kind that allows a room to be used and used again, without wearing anyone's name into it. Your palm on the ledge leaves warmth that fades in the time it takes a wick to settle. Look up one last time. The ceiling has grown another petal while you stood still. The bouquet is generous, but it never overwhelms. Soot is modest in its claims. It only asks to be allowed to continue. Navigation by these stars is simple. Where the flowers are thickest, the room has worked the hardest. Lamps have a voice that is mostly listening. A quiet sizzle, a soft answer from lime wash, and then the agreement that held the room together for one more hour. This is the sound of a city behaving itself after dark. If you look for comfort, you will find function instead. A basin remembers a wrist. A cloth remembers a fold. A jar remembers the path to the nearest fountain and back. Even errands have choreography here, and the choreography is the point. The lane outside puts away its louder instruments toward midnight. The phallic markers that bragged by day look like arrows now, and the arrows look like honesty. The address does not blush because the address is busy. Pause where the two entrances balance the air, the front admitting, the back releasing. The draft prefers the rear, as all gossip eventually learns to do. A building that can separate arrival from departure can also separate faces from stories. That is its oldest courtesy. Your shadow fits the corridor now as if it were measured for you. Perhaps all shadows fit here that way. The house keeps its promises modest. A circle of light. A wall that reads quickly. A floor that does not lie. Stand still and let the place insist on being ordinary. A shelf that remembers a cup. A hook that remembers a garment. A floor that remembers knees without requiring names. The exactness is a kind of kindness. It spares everyone the weight of adornment. When you turn, the fresco looks past your shoulder with the same patience it offers every back. Outside, the air is cooler, less salted by breath, more seasoned by ash and market dust. The chorus gathers itself. The solo ends where the sill does. Nothing grand announces itself. Repetition is the local triumph. Tomorrow a lamp will sizzle at the same clay lip. The ceiling will collect another petal of night. And the corridor will measure the same lengths in worn mortar. Your footprint will practice being ordinary until it disappears. And if you glance back once, no more than a blink, the doorway will have learned to be smaller than it felt, the way all necessary places do when the hour has finished with them. The stones accept the lesson and offer it again to the next step that pauses here. The hour begins before the door does. The street hasn't warmed yet, but the house is already measuring the day in small tasks. Wick to be trimmed, jar to be filled, cloth to be wrung, a room to be made into a circle of light that looks ready even when it is only patient. Put a pong to the stone ledge and feel last night's heat gone to ground. The bed is impartial again, exact as a ledger waiting for its first line. The lamp wants tending first. A pinch of the black bloom at the wick slip, a fresh mouthful of oil. The quiet sizzle that says the room has its voice back. Shade begins to behave, apprenticed by light. Frescoes on the lintels return from outline to instruction. Bodies simplified into verbs that can be read, without effort in a corridor made for doing rather than declaring. Water next. The jar knows the route to the nearest fountain and back. Lane. Corner. A brief queue with the baker's boys. The slosh of return measured in the hip. Inside, the basin accepts the pour like a promise. Cloth learns the day's first fold. These errands are the work beneath the work, the routine that keeps the hour from arriving as rumor instead of room. If coin is the measure, the wall remembers the scale. 2 asses, 4, sometimes more when the baths empty and the street arrives, with warm pockets and wet hair. The graffiti are last night's ledger in a hand that bites shallow. Athenae. 2 asses. Sabina. 2. Lucius was here. The prices match the city's rhythm. Faster after payday, slower in rain. Always within the handfuls that Pompeii taught itself to spend for forgetfulness. Names are tools, not truths. A madam might have chosen them, or a keeper. Greek names are common, bright with meanings that talk like promises. Euplia, fair voyage. Phyllis, leaf. Doris, gift. They are badges the city can pronounce and remember long enough to return, and forget quickly enough to make room for tomorrow's list. The first knocks are careful, the sort of knuckles that know how to make noise without drawing notice. A curtain answers, not a door. The hush that follows is the house's only lock. Work here begins before noon and lingers into the lamps. But mornings have their own clientele. Traders with early coin, laborers with late start, strangers who prefer empty corridors to crowds. The plan is ready for each. Entrance to the lane, exit to the back. A draft that suggests discretion without sermon. Preparation is tactile, practical, hair-tamed where it must be. A dab of oil where scent will carry gently, not far. A cloth warmed at the lamp's edge. A basin placed where a hand will find it without looking. The masonry bed is dressed with the same unargumentative cushion, the same clean fold. Here, the luxury is predictability. Things are where they were yesterday and will be where they are tomorrow. Because time is sold by the handful and cannot afford to hunt for itself, prices are a language, and the day speaks in integers. In the empire, fees between 1 and 25 asses are noted. In Pompeii, 2 to 20 asses is the graffiti's familiar bracket. A legionary's day might be worth about 10 asses. Bread weighs in at roughly an as per loaf. The hour here is priced to sit beside hunger and still have room to walk away. Not every sum includes the same verbs, and not every door writes the same numbers. But the coin finds its level like water. There is supervision where there is counting. A lino or lina, keeper, pimp, madam, sets the names, fixes the prices, receives the money, records the take, provides clothing and necessities. In larger or more organized houses, An overseer, velicis puellarum, keeps the ledger and the order. In smaller rooms, a single capable head keeps both by memory. The architecture hints at it. A corner with sight lines to both mouths. A place where standing looks like waiting and is not. Some cubicles once had little tablets hung by the door, names on one side, prices on the other, and a word to turn when the room is busy. Occupata. The humbler houses wrote the same sentence in chalk upon the jamb. The effect is the same. The corridor becomes a grammar. That spares anyone from asking what the wall already says. The hours find their pace by the sun and the baths. When steam pours from Stabian's upper vent, and men come out with skin the color of clay, the lane thickens. The brothel adjusts. Fees lean toward the higher end of the familiar bracket. The frescoes do more pointing in less time. The door learns to be both open and narrow, both welcoming and unentangling. The double entrance earns its keep most in this hour, when faces prefer to miss each other. Between waves, there are the small mercies that turn strain into continuation. A cup of watered wine, a crust dipped, a shared joke with the water boy at the door who ferries bowls for washing up. A hairdresser's quick repair in houses that aspire to loftier clientele. Not every room could afford them. Many did with cloth and habit. But even the briefest pause has its choreography. Sit, sip, smooth, stand, and the next knock is already polite at the curtain. Afternoons tend to the ledger. The overseer checks what the morning promised, adds what the baths delivered, subtracts what the cloth and the oil required. A day's keeping might be 10 asses before fees to a keeper or house. Some slaves retained a proportion of earnings. Some free workers rented rooms and paid for protection with a share. Exact sums vary, but the arithmetic repeats until it feels inevitable. When the light angles low, the lamp speaks more distinctly. The fresco's colors deepen, becoming instruction more than decoration. Wrists and hips point more clearly now than any arrow on stone. Clients who prefer dusk's discretion arrive in singles, not groups. The corridor's hush feels like competence rather than secrecy. If the lane outside tells louder stories, the rooms in here tell shorter truths. Evenings bring the risks that daytime delays. Non-payment is a hazard for those who work unescorted. Assault is a history the wall does not record because it has had to accommodate it. Brothels provided protection at a cost. The street offered freedom at a sharper cost. Registered workers stood outside certain moral laws that did not protect them. The city's legal gaze placed them at once inside the economy and outside the full shelter of citizenship. The plan, 2 entrances, rooms closed to help, walls that carry a cough farther than a promise. Does what it can. The night's last errands look like the morning's first. Lamps are pinched one by one, circle shrinks, sizzle softens, soot adds a petal to the bouquet above. The bed is stripped to its decisions and left to cool. The basin is emptied, the cloth wrung and hung where the air can finish what hands began. Graffiti sometimes gain a new line in a generous hour. More often, the day's math is kept in heads and shared glances. Registration, taxation, and the city's long reach are quieter, but always present. From Caligula's time, a tax equal to a usual fee might be due. sometimes collected from the worker, sometimes from the brothel keeper, at first by publicani, later even by soldiers in Rome. Permits, payments, inspections by aediles. These are not painted on walls, but they inhabit the ledger the same way oil inhabits the lamp, a cost built into light. Money deemed polluted is sent to public works. Even the coin is made to behave after it spends the night in here. Clothes are simple, chosen for wear, not display. A patchwork blanket serves as curtain in lesser rooms. Quilts that remember many hands serve, where cushions are too honest about their thinness. Shoes are by the door, turned inward or out depending on whether the room is speaking at the moment. Hair is an index of time, looser late, tighter early, practical always. Scent lives where soap is scarce. Oil and smoke do their share. A basin and a cloth do the rest. The room maintains the difference between clean enough and clean for show. That difference is a skill learned quickly and made muscle memory. The plan rewards it. Close walls forgive efficient routines. Low ceilings hold warmth to make water do more with less. Now and then, someone writes a sentence that is not a price. Thrust slowly, one hand advised on a wall that preserved more than sums. A greeting to a friend, a wish for luck, the kind of small human noise that fits between transactions without interrupting them. The building keeps these as willingly as it keeps numbers, because both are part of the hour's grammar. When the last lamp is thumbed to dark, the corridor gathers its quiet. The draft prefers the back way. The front learns to be a wall again. Stone remembers positions and forgets faces. The ledger sleeps in a head or a hidden strap. Your pawn leaves a last warmth on the ledge, and the room absorbs it without remark, as if heat and coin were the same visitor at different times of day. Outside, the city unrolls itself towards silence. Carts stopped, shutters drawn, bath steam thinning to nothing. Foreign's last arguments saved for morning. Inside, the settings return to neutral. The niche keeps its sutringed counsel. The frescoes retreat to outline. The double entrance exhales. The house has done its part. Tomorrow asks for the same choreography, and the plan knows it by heart. The day learns its shape from small tasks, and the small tasks learn yours. Wick, water, cloth, coin. A sequence the hands know before the lamps do. Trim the black petal at the flame's lip. Feed the clay mouth with oil. Listen for that soft sizzle. That means the room can speak again, without raising its voice. Your palm on the stone ledge finds it impartial as ever. Last night's heat filed away like a line in a ledger that never argues with totals. At the fountain, the jar remembers the route so the mind doesn't have to. Lane, corner, a word with the baker's boy. The shoulders tilt on the return. Inside, pour to basin, wring the cloth, folded where the hand will find it later without looking. These errands don't announce themselves as work. They make work possible and unremarkable. The way hinges make doors happen and then keep quiet about it. Prices set the day's grammar, but the wall teaches the accent. Athenae, 2 asses. Sabina, 2. When the bath's empty and hair is still wet, the numbers lean upward by habit, then relax again when steam thins at Stabian's vent. You can read the city's temperature in these small integers. They warm and cool with wages, weather, and the slow tide of errands that bring men to this door and send them on. The sums fit beside hunger without shoving it off the table. In Roman accounts, a common bracket runs from 2 to 20 asses. A legionary's day hovers near 10. A loaf wants its single as. The hour here sits between bread and bath, priced to be chosen without ceremony and forgotten without debt, except by the soot that never forgets anything. Names hang like tools where tools belong. Some are Greek, soft on the tongue and bright with meanings the city likes to say: Euplia, fair voyage; Phyllis, leaf; Doris, gift. Whether chosen by a keeper or adopted for the work, they do what names must: become easy for strangers, become easy to leave behind. You turn one over silently, the way a coin warms in the palm before it is counted. Knuckles know how to ask without telling a neighbor. The first knocks are careful. The curtain is the only lock the house needs at this hour. Mornings draw traders with early coin, laborers with a late start, and strangers who trust empty corridors more than crowded ones. The plan is built for them: a front for arrival, a back for departure, an air that prefers discretion without being asked twice. Preparation stays practical because it must. Hair tamed where it catches light. Oil dabbed where the scent will travel just far enough. A cloth warmed at the lamp. The cushion smoothed to erase the last conversation. The masonry bed accepts the same fold as yesterday and tomorrow. Predictability is the only luxury that never needs dusting. Your hands arrange it without thinking they are arranging anything at all. Fees do not explain themselves. The wall does. A tablet at some doors once flipped from name to price to occupied. A chalked word does the same job where wood was a rumor and chalk was cheap. The corridor becomes a sentence with fewer questions. The answers are already hanging at the jamb, waiting for eyes that prefer not to ask. The house keeps its own head for counting. A keeper, Lena or Lino, fixes prices, takes coins, provides cloth and oil, watches the two mouths of the plan. In humbler rooms the ledger lives between the ears. In busier ones an overseer minds the sums and the order together. Either way, sightlines betray the post, a corner that watches. Arrivals without being seen to watch. In the city's wider arithmetic, authorities will have their share. Registration somewhere, once upon a start. A tax equal to a usual fee in some places, collected then by publicani or soldiers elsewhere. Inspections and fines that arrive like weather. Light has a cost. The lamp knows it better than anyone and still burns. Midday is often a rehearsal for evening. When steam shoulders out of the baths and laughter carries, feet quicken. The corridor learns to be both narrower and kinder. The frescoes to point faster. The back exit to act like an old friend. You feel your own voice slip into the register the wall won't carry. The curtain learns a new patience. Between waves, there is the craft of continuing. A cup of watered wine, a crust dipped. A shared taunt with the water boy who ferries bowls between basin and doorway. Not every house could afford a hairdresser, but every house learned the trick of making a minute big enough to hold breath. Your shoulders measure that minute and give it back whole. The afternoon ledger settles like dust. Coins sorted, oil set aside, cloth counted by touch. The day's arithmetic aligned to what the Baths promised and the weather delivered. Slaves in some houses keep a portion. Free workers in others rent rooms and barter safety into their sums. The rest, that familiar percentage, walks to a keeper who keeps the door as much as the book. Your ear recognizes the clink of coin that stays and the clink that leaves. This is the hour the frescoes do their best work. With the sun behind the lintel, the lamp makes the paint a language again. Wrists and hips simplified into verbs no one needs to translate. You can't stand beneath a panel and learn in one glance. What would take a speech 10 minutes to say poorly? The wall prefers you well briefed and soon gone. The risks arrive with dusk because men do. Non-payment is a risk for anyone without a door at their back. Assault is an old story the plaster does not write down, because it had to absorb it instead. Houses traded a portion of coin for protection that worked as well as a corner can. And no better. You notice how far a cough travels, how quickly a foot can cover the corridor when the plan is compact on purpose. Still, work asks for posture more than pity. Registered names exist both inside and outside the law at once. The way a curtain is both door and not. Stigma is a tax the wall cannot count. It collects itself in glances that bounce and leave no mark. Your hands return to tasks they know, which is the only way time continues here. Evening rituals look like morning in reverse. A last basin poured out, cloth wrung and hung. The jar set near the door that leans toward fountains at first light. Lamps pinched one by one. The ceiling keeps its petals and asks for one more tomorrow. If a new line of graffiti appears, it does so in a generous pocket of time. A boast, a greeting, a joke that will outlive 3 sets of hands, maybe 5. Sometimes a line of counsel survives beside the prices, thrust slowly. One wall advised, the kind of sentence not meant for ledgers, but preserved by obsession anyway. You smile without showing it. The house collects small human weather along with soot, and both are honest record keepers in their way. Outside, night arranges the city into fewer instruments, less cry, more murmur, fewer wheels, more sandals. Bath steam finished. Forum's arguments folded for dawn. Inside, neutrality returns. Cushions cooled to their decisions. Ledges unburdened, niches ringed in soot-minded patience. Your pawn leaves a heat. That fades exactly as quickly as the wick would have if you'd left it lit. The draft prefers the rear, as if stories do better leaving than arriving. The front relearns how to be a wall. Stone files positions and deletes faces. Tomorrow will ask for the same sequence in the same order. And the plan will nod because this is what plans are for. The last thing to forget you is the smell of oil on your skin, which is to say the first thing to remember you will be the lamp. Morning begins with the soft arithmetic of readiness. Wick trimmed, oil decanted, basin filled, cloth wrung, cushion smoothed. The choreography that turns a room from stone and paint into a circle of light that can keep a promise on time. Your hand learns the temperature of tasks. The jar cool from the fountain. The lamp warm as a whisper. The masonry ledge returned to neutrality after filing away. Last night's heat like a line in a ledger that does not argue. The wall keeps the city's pulse in shallow cuts. Prices, names, little boasts that read like receipts for moods. Athenae, 2 asses. Sabina, 2. A greeting that outlives its author by the mercy of lime and habit. The bracket is familiar because the baths set it. When steam pours and wet hair darkens the lane, coin loosens toward the upper end. When rain stays men home, the integers cool to the lower. An economy so regular the plaster can do the counting. A keeper's corner makes sense of movement. One eye on the lane mouth, one on the back way, a posture that looks like waiting and is not. Lena or Orlino balancing names, prices, and cloth the way a hinge balances a door without announcing itself. In busier houses an overseer minds sums and order, vilicus puellarum in some accounts, while in humbler rooms the ledger lives in a head, the enforcement in sight lines, and the plan in the old honesty of 2 entrances that spare faces from meeting. Registration sits under the day like a stone under straw. It does not move, even when ignored. Names entered with the aediles, a tax in some places set equal to a usual fee, collected by public contractors once and later even by soldiers. Because light has a cost, and the city will take it. The coin that leaves here is sometimes declared polluted, and then made to fund public uses. The way a conscience learns to make itself useful in daylight. Even after spending the night in settings it pretends not to remember. Objects memorize their work so hands can forget it. A basin that has learned the curve of a wrist. A cloth that refolds to the same rectangle. A jar that leans into the shoulder along the same route to water and back. So the hour can arrive as room instead of rumor. Frescoes do their daylight modesty and lamplight. Clarity with equal patience. In outline by morning. In instruction by dusk. Wrists, hips, and the simplified verbs of a trade that prefers legible paint to long explanations. A tablet once flipped at some doors. Name, number, occupata. Where wood was used, where wood was rumor. Trock wrote the same sentence at the jam. So the corridor could be a grammar that spared everyone questions, already answered by the wall. Your voice finds the register plaster will not carry. Curtains become doors when sound agrees to stop at cloth. And doors become curtains when a hinge learns to breathe instead of speak. The baths throw a tide across the neighborhood. Stabians vent steams. Laughter spills. Sandals quicken. The brothel narrows without closing. The back way behaves like a friend of long standing, and the frescoes point faster without raising their painted hands. Between tides, continuation is a craft, a mouthful of watered wine, a crust dipped, a joke to the water boy ferrying bowls, the practical mercy of a warmed cloth, minutes made big, enough to hold breath and return it without a sound. Risks belong to dusk because men do. Refusal to pay where there is no door. Hands that do not honor being told to stop. The plan answers with proximity to help. 2 mouths for movement. Walls that carry a cough farther than a promise. And the keeper who knows which footfall belongs to which choice. Stigma is the tax no ledger can show, registered and set apart. Inside the economy and outside full shelter, the law's gaze sees the work, clearly enough to count it, and indistinctly enough to leave it uncovered when the counting ends. Evening repeats morning backward, basins emptied, cloths wrung and hung, oil set aside. Lamp thumbs gentling each flame to silence while the ceiling grows. Another petal in its black bouquet. Night's slow ledger kept in soot instead of ink. Now and then a new sentence earns a space among prices. Thrust slowly. One wall advised, the kind of counsel not meant for tax or tally. Preserved anyway because obsessions are meticulous archivists. When tools are near to hand, clothes perform function over fiction. Patchwork curtain in lesser rooms. A quilt that remembers many hands. Where cushions are too honest about their thinness. Shoes turned inward or out to say what a mouth need not. Hair is index. Tight early, looser late. Always practical where ceilings keep the warmth close. Scent makes its way where soap is scarce. Oil and smoke do their parts. Water and cloth do the rest. Walls keep heat close enough to make a little go far, which is the only domestic luxury the plan is designed to afford. Counting returns as a feel in the hand. Coin that stays and coin that leaves have different voices in a keeper's palm. In some places slaves keep a share. In others free workers rent rooms and barter safety into their take. But the percentages learn to repeat until they seem like weather rather than choice. The street signs do. Daylight bluntness, phallic markers. That are arrows or amulets, depending on who is looking. While inside the paint keeps night's candor, pointing without pointing. So finding and being found can share a verb and finish quickly. If you stand still, the house arranges itself around your breath. Cooler draft by the rear mouth. Warmer pocket by the lamp niche. A held breath quiet. Behind a curtain that learned to be a door at the sound of a lowered voice. Floors worn smooth where waiting stands and rough where decisions live. The plan is exact and prefers not to improvise. Corridor as sentence. Rooms as clauses. Stair as a conjunction. Clear. Repeatable. Legible at a glance. Because time here is sold by the handful and cannot afford ambiguity to waste it. When the last flame is pinched, stone files positions and deletes faces, as it was designed to do. The ledger sleeps in a head or a hidden scrap. The jar leans toward the first water of morning. The niche keeps its suturing counsel without asking for proof. Outside, the neighborhood puts its louder instruments away. Bath steam finished. Shutters set. Forums talk folded. Inside, neutrality returns. Not as indifference, but as readiness. Rooms cooling to exactness. Walls returning to outline. Paint waiting for the next circle of light to make it a language again. The work is a circle, and the circle has rules. They do not arrive like proclamations. They sit beneath the tasks the way a stone sits beneath straw. Weight felt more than seen. The lamp drinks oil because permits were once inked. Names once entered. A status once declared. Registration makes a worker visible to the city and invisible to certain. Protections in the same breath. It grants permission by placing the body outside the comfort of full respectability. The curtain knows that paradox without needing to learn the Latin for it. Names are part of the paperwork and part of the costume. They travel easier when they are Greek or soft, when they can be said with a coin in the same hand. A name can be assigned by a mouth that also assigns prices. Another can be chosen because it sits well on the day's tongue. Either way, the ledger prefers a word it can write fast, and the door prefers a word it can hear through cloth. A name here is an instrument more than a history. precise like a tool and just as replaceable. The house keeps its own statute of movement. The front takes arrival, the back takes departure. The staircase connects discretion to gravity and will not argue. A keeper's corner, watching both mouths without seeming to, serves as the building's oversight. Coins pass. Chalk turns to occupata. A hand records what a head cannot afford to forget. Enforcement is mostly sightlines and routine. Correction is mostly a cough that travels farther than a promise. Beyond the plaster, the larger city applies its arithmetic. A tax equal to a familiar fee pads the coffers, then washes itself in public respectability. Roads, fountains, a temple's stone, as if coins past could be argued with by daylight. Permits are not stories. They are conditions. They can be inspected by men who do not wish to be here, and by men who wish. They did not have to admit they are. Ordeals flattened to compliance, a name recorded, a sum remitted. A door left to do its work with a little less noise. Clothes obey policy even when cloth is thin. Garments signal availability and never wander too close to the costumes of chastity. Hair is arranged to read as labor, not leisure. Jewelry tends to the minimal. Not because beauty is forbidden, but because it is taxed by attention, and attention has better buyers elsewhere. The room's decoration already speaks for the hour. The body need not argue further. Schedules obey the city's rhythms, which are their own form of ordinance. When baths pour out steam and laughter, prices lean up within the bracket everyone can recite without looking. When rain complicates streets and tempers, numbers cool. The day's ledger, though private, speaks in a language any inspector could verify. Coin counted, cloth replaced, oil accounted for, rent acknowledged, cut delivered to the name that holds the key. Restrictions are also cautions in plain clothes. No sleeping on the stone. The bed is designed to end the hour on time. No spectacle at the front. Curtains and doors negotiate where I stop, and the corridor agrees. No claims that would unthread the plan. What happens here is the city's tolerated confession, necessary, unadorned, not to be mistaken for an invitation to speak loudly about it. Reputation is a regulation without parchment. The registered body is both permitted and set apart. There are thresholds that will not receive it. There are magistrates who will accept the tax and not the greeting. Children of this house inherit shadow as their surname, even if the ledger granted them a sliver of coin. A worker's freedom, when present, buys smaller freedoms. A slave's percentage purchases the right to hope at scale. The law's gaze is exacted counting and imprecise at compassion. Inside, protection is a practice more than a guarantee. The corridor's nearness is policy. The two entrances are policy. The keeper's presence is policy. Fists are not receipts, and refusal is not enforcement. But speed can be both. The cough that reaches 3 doors down. The step that closes half the plan into heartbeats. These are the house's bylaws when men grow bolder than manners. It is not justice. It is continuity. Tokens circulate where anonymity prefers not to be minted in official metal. A round of stamped substitutes may buy an hour and return as a different coin outside, washed into market noise. Whether the symbol is a number or a figure, the effect is the same. The ledger knows value. The pawn knows exchange. The inspector, if ever present, knows only that the sum's aligned with the expectation the city prefers. The wall writes what rules cannot carry elegantly. No bartering beyond what the chalk already declared. No delays that grind the plan into nuisance. No claims that rearrange the order of exits and entries. The frescoes do the legal signage's work at a human scale. Clarity beats ornament. Brevity beats romance. Consent is the choreography and the timekeeper. Moral talk stays outside and puts on its public voice. In here, there is only compliance and refusal, and both are measured by whether the hour arrives at its end with the door free to breathe. Opinions held at the forum drain into custom by the time they reach this lane. Custom, repeated often enough, passes for regulation in rooms that have no patience for speeches longer than a wick. The law's categories make their own weather. The meretrix may register and be counted. The matrona may not enter and remain counted anyway by 1,000 other sums. Citizens, freed persons, enslaved. Each walks through the plan with a different shadow and leaves the same warmth on the stone. The ledger does not record dignities, only coin. The corridor enforces only distance, not pedigree. The house learns to keep the city's secrets. It knows which sandals belong to men who cannot afford to be recognized, and which voices must not be repeated, even by accident. Rules teach restraint as muscle memory. A turned shoe, a lowered voice, a lifted curtain that moves like an eyelid rather than a flag. This is governance by choreography, not statute. Efficient, unglamorous, tired and tireless. Inspection visits have a smell, wax, dust, a colder air that does not belong. Rooms show their exactness, cushions aired, jars clean, lamps accounted for, cloths folded to the ruler of routine. Questions are old, answers older, papers placed where they must be seen. Names written the way a hand learns to spell its own survival. Once the officials leave, the rooms exhale and remember their true sizes. Penalties exist, rarely theatrical, often financial. Fines fold into rent. Rent eats the day's peak and calls it fairness. A corner learns to be a desk when numbers arrive. A worker learns to make tomorrow out of today's remainder. Nothing here is new. Everything here is current. Restrictions on who may linger are a policy of the floor as much as of custom. The masonry bed dissuades sleep. The lamp's diminishing circle insists on punctuation. The narrow corridor admits only the grammar the plan can process. Overstaying is a violation of both courtesy and calculus. The house does not forgive arithmetic errors beyond the first reminder. Safety is a set of cues rehearsed into second nature. A phrase to end the hour early. A knock that summons help without names. A glance to the keeper's corner that says coin hasn't arrived or timber has. It is not a code born of optimism. It is a procedure born of the certainty that the city's protection travels slowly, if it travels at all. Outside, reputation and rumor negotiate who may be seen where. Inside, evidence is simpler. The lamp either burned or did not. The coin either rang or did not. The cloth either needed washing or did not. The room is accountable to practicalities first, to sentiment last. This is less cruelty than triage. By night's end, the rules have become the room again. The double mouth breathes, the keeper's corner goes back to being a corner, the ledger returns to a head's pocket, the name returns to its hook beside the curtain, the frescoes retire their clarity to outline, the tax sleeps in the sums the door made possible, and the lamp, dutiful and small, accepts that tomorrow's compliance requires tomorrow's oil, and tomorrow's oil must be fetched, registered, counted, carried, and burned on time. Rules here don't shout. They organize breath. After the door has finished with the day's last coin, the room folds itself back into compliance, wick trimmed down to its thought, jar angled toward morning, curtain reset to neutrality. What looks like tiding is also obedience to a registration once spoken aloud, to a ledger that expects columns to add, to a city that prefers sins that can be counted. The lamp burns because a name was written somewhere first, and being written down is both permission and boundary. The first rule is visibility, and the second is what visibility costs. A name entered with the authorities makes the work legal enough to tax, inspect, and tolerate. Legal enough to count, but not so legal that other doors will open. The body is permitted while the person is demoted. The trade is allowed while respect is withheld. You learn to move inside that paradox the way you learn the corridor's width. With your shoulders before your eyes, the plan itself enforces policy without needing to be told to. A front mouth for arrivals, a back mouth for departures, stairs that carry discretion upward without ceremony, a keeper's corner that sees both mouths and stands as the nearest thing to law when the law is far away. When sums are due, the counter becomes a desk. When danger arrives, a single cough goes farther than a shouted name. Names work like tools and are treated the same, chosen for use, not lineage. Greek names are common: Euclea, Phyllis, Doris. Smooth enough to sell, soft enough to forget. In some houses, names are assigned with prices by a manager. In others, a worker picks one that fits. Either way, the chalk writes quickly at the jam, and the tablet flips to occupata with the same economy of motion. Tax is the city's quietest visitor. In some times and places, it equals the usual fee, collected by contractors or even soldiers. It arrives dressed as arithmetic and leaves as stone, and water somewhere respectable. Roads, fountains, a temple's step. The coin's night history is laundered by daylight's projects, but the subtraction in a pom feels the same either way. Inspection has a smell: wax, dust, a cooler draft pushing ahead of a boot. Paper appears where paper must be seen. Lamps are counted. Jars are clean. Cloth is folded to the ruler of routine. Questions are old, answers older. Name, fee, compliance. Until the doorway learns to be smaller again, and the house exhales back into its working size. Restrictions sit at the level of objects. Garments signal labor without imitating chastity. Hair is arranged to read as work, not leisure. Jewelry is sparse because attention is expensive and has better buyers elsewhere. The masonry bed is an ordinance, written in stone, comfortable enough to contain an hour, uncomfortable enough to end it on time. Schedules are enforced by the city's habits. When steam shoulders from Stabians vent and wet hair darkens the lane, prices lean up inside the familiar bracket. 2 to 20 asses noted on the walls, then settle as the baths empty. Rain cools sums, paydays warm them. An inspector wouldn't need a book. The plaster's arithmetic would tell him the truth at a glance. Protection is procedural, not promised. The two mouths exist for speed more than show. The keeper's corner balances sightlines and help. Rooms are close enough that a cough can cross 3 doors. Fists are not receipts. Refusal is not enforcement. But speed sometimes can be both. In rooms like these, continuity often stands in for justice because justice travels slowly. Reputation is a regulation without parchment. Registered workers are permitted and set apart. Some thresholds will not receive them. Some magistrates will take the tax and not the greeting. A child born to this ledger inherits a shadow before a surname. The law is exact at counting and imprecise at compassion. The corridor learns to carry both truths without comment. The graffiti write what rules cannot carry elegantly. No bargaining beyond what the chalk declares. No delay that clogs the plan. No claims that rearrange exits and entries. Prices, names, boasts, advice. Thrust slowly, one wall cancelled. Together form the house's vernacular code. Clarity over ornament. Brevity over romance. Consent and completion timed by a wick. Management has its own chain of command. Some houses are owned and run by a Lino or Lina. Others are rooms rented out with a keeper acting as agent. In busier establishments, a vicus puellarum assigns names, fixes prices, takes payment, provides clothing, and keeps the accounts. The closest thing to governance these walls will see in uniform. Not everyone here owns their hours. Many are enslaved, earnings tallied under someone else's column. Conditions enforced by proximity and custom. Some are free, renting space and bartering a portion of safety into their fee. Status alters the ledger and little else. The frescoes instruct the same. The lamp burns the same. The masonry remembers positions, not pedigrees. Public morality speaks loudly in forums and softly in lanes. Outside, it arranges virtues on benches and calls it order. Inside, it accepts that appetite and coin meet more efficiently when the corridor is honest. Brothels do not scandalize policy. They stabilize it, making desire legible, taxable, and quiet. The paradox is old. The plan is older. Tokens may appear where anonymity wants a face the city won't recognize. A stamped spintria can pass for a promise and return as a different coin outside. Whether the inspector approves the symbol, the ledger approves the value. Pom to pom is the only court that pronounces sentence here. Penalties prefer subtraction to spectacle. Fines fold into rent. Rent eats the day's best hours. The remainder becomes tomorrow. The corner learns to be a desk. The curtain learns to be stern. The door learns to breathe on time. In the arithmetic of survival, compliance is cheaper than complaint. Custom is the strongest ordinance. Shoes turned inward or out to signal status of a room. A lowered voice that the plaster refuses to carry. A lifted curtain that moves like an eyelid, not a flag. You practice these until they live in your wrists. Because in here law is mostly choreography that keeps the corridor moving. Outside, blunt markers in stone point one way or ward off envy. Arrows or amulets depending on who is looking. Inside, painted wrists and hips point without pointing. Between the two, the house fulfills the city's compact, finding and being found with minimal noise, maximum clarity, and a paper trail that fits in a palm. By the time the lamp's last petal of soot blooms on the ceiling, the rules have returned to objects. The double mouth breathes evenly. The keeper's corner becomes just a corner again. The ledger crawls back into a head or a hidden scrap. The name hangs beside the curtain like a tool put away. Tomorrow the same permissions will be fetched, counted, carried, and burned. On time, because time is the only supervisor who never forgets to arrive. The city's tolerance is a ledger entry, not a blessing, and ledgers require handwriting. Somewhere, a name was taken down, made visible to the magistrates, who keep commerce legible and invisible to courtesies that follow other names home. Being written down allows the door to open. Being written down also narrows where else a door will open. The room learns to handle that paradox by muscle memory. Greet, conduct, conclude, and let the curtain be the final sentence. Registration fixes the body in the city's arithmetic and loosens it from certain dignities at the same time. It makes an hour taxable, the house inspectable, the keeper responsible, and the worker accountable. The benefit is predictability. The penalty is placement. Inside the economy and outside full protection. The corridor shrugs and carries both truths. The way it carries sound without keeping it. Management structures turn policy into practice. A keeper, the lino or lina, stands at the corner that sees both mouths, not as decor, but as the nearest form of law a house can afford. In larger concerns, an overseer minds the names, fixes the prices, receives payment, provides cloth and oil, and keeps accounts. In smaller ones, the head does what paper would do if paper were always at hand. In both, sightlines are the first enforcement, speed the second. Fees obey a bracket everyone near the baths can recite without looking. 2 to 20 asses is not an anthem. It's a temperature scale. Bath steam warms it upward. Weather cools it. Paydays lift it for a night. Rain sits on it until it's practical again. A tablet may flip from name to price to occupotter. Where wood is a rumor, chalk writes the same sentence on the jam. The wall prefers clarity to negotiation because time is sold by the handful. The law's reach arrives mostly as subtraction. A tax equal to a usual fee is collected by contractors in one reign, by soldiers another, and is sent to daylight projects that launder night's arithmetic into roads and fountains. Fines prefer folding into rent instead of theatre. An inspection smells of wax and dust, lamps counted, jars clean, cloth folded to the ruler of routine, papers put where eyes must find them. When boots leave, rooms return to their true size. Restrictions live in garments and objects. Hair arranged to read as work and not leisure. Jewelry kept sparse because attention is expensive and has better buyers outside. A masonry bed that makes sure an hour ends when the lamp says it does. The plan enforces posture, 2 mouths for movement, narrow corridors for pace, rooms so close that a cough can outrun a lie. Protection here is procedural, not promised. Status alters the ledger line more than the floor. Some here rent rooms and barter safety into their sums. Others earn towards someone else's column and a permission that might change. The name over a door someday. The frescoes instruct without asking who pays whom. The lamp burns the same hours no matter whose purse opens. Stone remembers positions, not pedigrees. The law is exact at counting and imprecise at compassion. The plan survives the difference. Custom is choreography that passes for ordinance. Shoes turned inward or out to signal when a room speaks. A voice lowered to the register plaster refuses to carry. A curtain lifted like an eyelid, never a flag. You practice these until your wrists know them without asking your mouth. In here, governance is mostly a pace. Greet, conduct, conclude, reset. Anything louder is somebody else's problem on another street. The city's blunt signage in stone, arrows or amulets, depending on who is looking. Does daylight's pointing? Inside, painted wrists and hips do night's candor, pointing without pointing. Between the two, the compact is fulfilled, finding and being found with minimal noise and maximal legibility. Chalk writes what must be read. Coin answers what must be asked. The door breathes on time. Risk is real and therefore planned for. A phrase ends the hour early. A knock summons help without names. A glance to the corner translates coin delayed or temper raised. None of this guarantees safety. It guarantees speed. And speed often stands in for justice when justice travels slowly. The corridor keeps room for a cough to cross 3 doors. The plan isn't brave. It's prepared. Tokens circulate where anonymity wants a face that coin will not give. A stout spintria may change hands in the room and change back to money in the street. The value recognized even if the symbol is not blessed. The pawn knows what the ledger will accept. The inspector, if he ever asks, gets arithmetic rather than iconography for an answer. The graffiti finish what ordinances cannot start. Prices that move like weather. Names that outlive their owners by lime's patience. Jokes that sharpen into warnings. Advice that reads like a friend's whisper frost slowly staying. Because obsession is a better archivist than policy, together they form a vernacular code. The walls can enforce with nothing but space and time. The wider city calls itself moral by locating appetite, where it can be taxed, inspected, and kept from interrupting dinner. Brothels don't scandalize that order, they stabilize it by making desire legible. The paradox is old. Condemn in the forum, count at the door. The plan answers by being efficient instead of eloquent. The lamp agrees. By the last pinch of flame, governance has turned back into objects, a curtain reset to neutrality, a name hung like a tool beside it. A ledger returning to a head or a hidden scrap. To entrances breathing evenly again. Tomorrow's compliance will require tomorrow's oil. Fetched in the same jar. Carried by the same shoulder. Burned into the same soot petal on the same ceiling. The law will arrive as subtraction. Leave as daylight stone. And be met in here by the only ordinance that never changes. Begin on time, end on time, and leave the door ready to breathe. The hour can follow every ordinance, and still leave a weight in the joints that no ledger records. The lamplight keeps perfect time. The chalk tells the truth. The curtain learns to breathe on cue. And yet the body pays in a currency the city doesn't count. Fatigue is the quiet tax beneath the visible ones. Compound interest gathered in the wrists, the knees, the small of the back where the masonry's honesty settles in. The room is exact. The work is exact. Exhaustion is the rounding error that never rounds down. The stone bed is nobody's enemy and nobody's friend. It refuses sentiment and squeaks, which is a kind of mercy. But it also refuses softness, which is another kind of arithmetic. Straw makes the pretense, cloth the courtesy, oil the light that disguises neither. After so many hours, even neutrality feels like an opinion. The ledge cools while the joints do not. Warmth moves from body to wall and stays there as if it had found a better home. The plaster never admits it stole anything from skin, but the soot above the lamp tells on the theft. Petal by patient petal, hands become ledgers. Fingers remember coin by sound and weight. Long after the ear and palm pretend to forget. Knuckles learn knocks. Which ones carry temper? Which carry shame? Which will take no for an answer? Which will spend as if that were apology enough? Skin knows the fountain's water by temperature in every season. The shoulder knows the jar's seam as if it were kin. Exhaustion hides in those repetitions, not in drama, but in the exactness of always getting it right again. The house helps in the ways it can. 2 mouths for movement, rooms close enough that a cough is a policy, sight lines for the person who stands where the corner sees both doors. That is procedure, and it works as often as it doesn't have to prove itself. But even efficiency rubs the bones down a little. Speed is not rest. Preparedness is not peace. A practiced rescue is still a rescue, and the body marks it under a column named after the hour it saved, not the person. Names wear thin the way good tools do. A Greek name that sells well also erodes quickly. It is meant to be light in the mouth and lighter still in memory, except in the worker's own skull, where each alias gets stacked like folded cloth. By midnight, the stack is taller than it looks. By morning, it has been smoothed into a single layer again, as if identity were a blanket iron flat for the next coin. That flattening is work too. The kind that never appears in sums. Smell keeps truer books than paper. Oil, smoke, sweat, lime. The metal taste of coin. The cold clean of fountain water when it first meets the bowl. These are the day's footnotes. They accumulate until they feel like a second body. A cloth can lift some of it away. A warmed bowl can soften the edges. A dab of scent can draw a little line of air that someone might mistake for relief. But fatigue is also olfactory. A weight behind the nose that says the lamp has burned longer than the wick meant to. The frescoes do not tire. Paint is an inhuman endurance. It holds its posture indefinitely, a wrist forever extended. A hip forever at the same angle, clarity that never sags. It is generous of the wall to carry that burden, to keep explaining what time sells and how to spend it quickly. The living body's generosity looks different. It steps into the instruction, performs it, and steps back out without taking the image down with it. That stepping is where the weight lives, not in disgrace, but in the repetition of being the proof that the picture works. Outside, the baths set the pulse. Inside, The bones do. Steam that means more coin also means more posture. More voice lowered to a register the plaster will not carry. More curtains lifted and let fall like eyelids that never get to sleep. Rain that lowers sums also lowers tempers, turns hands into arguments. The corridor obeys the city's weather, and the body obeys the corridors. That layered obedience is a kind of toil that the plan was never designed to count. Food slides between the hours without making announcements. A crust dipped is a solution more than a meal. Watered wine is method more than indulgence. The basin's warmth is medicine. The warmed cloth is something like time disguised as steam. Appetite adjusts until it feels like a posture. First learns to listen for the water boy's footfall as a cue to be patient. These are the small negotiations by which fatigue agrees not to break anything important until the lumps are pinched. There is also the arithmetic nobody speaks aloud. A portion to the keeper, a portion to rent, a portion to oil, a portion to cloth, a portion to the city. The remainder has another name, continuation. Exhaustion lives exactly there, in the truth that after the math is honest, the body must still take the next step, not because courage is demanded, but because the corridor prefers moving to explaining. Survival is a style here, and the style is competence. Risk is heavier at dusk. Non-payment is fatiguing in its own way. A promise that makes muscle tense for an argument instead of for work. Violence is another account entirely, and the building is designed to settle it quickly if it can. But even a rescue costs. The breath that carries a cough 3 doors down is not free. The step that closes half a corridor into heartbeats takes a toll. The lungs will send an invoice for later. The house prefers preparedness because it has learned what payment panic demands. Stigma is a weight that does not move even when the body does. It doesn't bruise visibly, but it sits in the spine under certain greetings, or the lack of them. In markets where the same coin that paid for an hour buys, bread that refuses not to know where it came from. Reputation calculates itself, and often badly. It overcharges in shame and underpays in respect. The corridor has found a workaround, an exit that makes strangers of people who were companions 5 minutes earlier. The trick works. The weight stays. Sleep is thinner here than it is elsewhere, and not only because of straw. Stone teaches dreams a fear of edges. Ceilings teach them to be small. Lamps leave ghosts on the eye even when pinched. Amber circles that return when lids close. Dawn is a kindness because it cancels those circles and replaces them with tasks that pretend to be easier because they are visible again. The first jar's lift persuades the wrists that they are rested. The wrists pretend back. Even the house tires, if such a thing can be said of stone. The floor learns the difference between waiting and deciding, and wears unevenly in favor of both. The railing that isn't there anymore continues to creak in memory. The soot bouquet on the ceiling grows lush and morbid at once. The plan remains efficient, but efficiency is also a history of strain written into edges and corners. Exactness ages, so does competence. They do not complain. Some lines on the wall refuse to leave because fatigue didn't either. Advice that pretends to be a joke. Jokes that pretend to be advice. Names that meant come back. When carved and mean, someone stood here when read now. They are not sentimental. They are evidence. The room does not remember faces on purpose, but the wall remembers hands, because lime is better at that than mercy is. And yet the city continues to behave itself because spaces like this keep their promises on time. Appetite remains taxable. Hours end when they should. The baths send men into lanes where curtains know what to do. Coin passes into hands that know where to send it next. Order is a strange comfort when it arrives without kindness. The weight does not go away. It becomes a method. The method becomes the day. If mercy appears, it usually wears practical clothes. A quieter hour than expected. A client who speaks in a way that makes the room feel bigger for a minute. A cup of water brought without being asked. A lamp that lights on the first try. None of these are fame. All of these are fuel. Exhaustion learns to save them like coins in a hidden pocket that rent cannot find. By the time the lamps are thumbed to dark again, the arithmetic looks exactly like it did yesterday. The jar leans toward the morning. The cloth dries into its old fold. The curtain breathes itself back into a straight line. The soot flower adds another petal to the bouquet that will outlive every name it overshadowed. The body lies down near stone that refuses to pretend about softness. The hour ends, not in triumph or tragedy, but in the weight of ordinary life carried correctly to the next beginning. The lamp keeps the rules. The body keeps the bill. After the last inspection smelling hour, after the ledger subtracts what it must and the curtain relearns its straight line, the weight remains quiet, cumulative, correct. Fatigue doesn't contradict the plan. It fulfills it. The way soot fulfills flame. Hands remember coin by sound. Shoulders remember jars by seam. Knees remember stairs without looking. The city counts fees. The bones count repetitions. The numbers match, and still something is owed. Sleep, when it comes, is not a curtain but a shade. Thin, obedient, practical. Stone offers no mercy except neutrality, which is a kind of mercy that rarely feels like one. Dreams learn the room's edge and stay small inside it. Even with the lamp pinched, the eye carries an amber circle into the dark that takes a while to forget. Morning erases it with tasks, which is both relief and sentence. Wick, water, cloth, coin. Begin where the body last ended and ask it to do the same trick again. There is a toil that lives in posture alone. A voice lowered to the register plaster refuses to carry. A back that learns the angle paint requests of it. A wrist that points where fresco wrists already pointed. The images do not tire. Pigment has no lungs. The living do the work of proof. Step into instruction, perform it. Step out without borrowing any of paint's endlessness. That stepping is the cost, not disgraceful, only regular, paid at the rate of hours. Outside, the baths are timekeepers. Inside, breath is. When steam pours and sandals hurry, sums lean up and spines lean forward. When rain cools tempers and streets, prices settle and feet slow. The house obeys weather, and the body obeys the house. And somewhere in that layering, weariness acquires a citizenship of its own. It pays on time, leaves no graffiti, and never forgets to return. Mercy still has ways to arrive without fuss. A basin warmed exactly right. A cloth folded to the same comfort. A joke from the water boy that lands like a swallow on a sill, light and precise. A client who speaks in a way that makes the room feel larger for a minute. Not a fortune, not a miracle, only fuel. The house knows how to collect such fuel the way it collects soot. Quietly. For later. Food is an instrument, not an occasion. A crust dipped, a mouthful of watered wine. A piece of fruit when the market is generous. Appetite schedules itself between errands and never. Interrupts the corridor's grammar. The body learns to keep hunger in the same drawer as patience. First listens for the familiar. Footfall by the door and pretends to be smaller until the bowl arrives. Some names are light enough to carry even when nothing else is. A Greek syllable that sells well. A soft sound that strangers can say without thinking. It is a tool, a costume, a receipt. It stacks with other names folded beneath it. Smooth each morning into one face so the door sees the same worker it expects. Identity here is not a lie. It is an exact fit. Worn, cleaned, worn again. There are hours that cost more than coin. Refusal that turns into argument. Temper that asks the corridor to prove its purpose with speed. A cough that must travel far and return with feet close behind. Preparedness is not peace, but it is a close relative. The plan prefers relatives to strangers. Even so, lungs send invoices later. Breath, too, keeps ledgers. Stigma does not change its clothes for anyone. It does not shout. It sits at the baker's, at the fountain. In the way a greeting misses its mark by an inch and pretends that is accuracy. The city taxes desire and pretends taxation is all the speech required. The house has learned the counter language. 2 mouths for forgetting. Faces that choose not to meet. Exits that turn companions back into strangers on time. The building itself shows what exactness costs. Mortar polished smooth where waiting stands. Edges chipped where decisions always pause. The ghost rail that creaks in memory, though it has long since gone elsewhere. A ceiling garden of soot that blooms more lushly each night. Efficiency is also history. The corners keep it. The plan does not complain, because that is not its function. It functions, and the keeping is left to stone. There are sentences on the wall that lasted because the work did. Prices that move with weather. Names intended as invitations that remain as evidence. Jokes filed as advice. Thrust slowly, because some obsessions are better archivists than rules. None of it is sentimental. It is practical memory, a vernacular of survival written shallowly and renewed often. Evening returns to morning by way of exactness. Lumps pinch down one by one. The bouquet above gets another petal. Cushions return to their decisions. Jars lean toward the root the shoulder knows. Cloth dries into its old fold, and the body, which has carried every ordinance faithfully, carries fatigue without ceremony to where sleep will accept it. Let the hour slow without apology. The last errands are small and merciful. Wick shortened to a thought. Oil kept for dawn. Basin emptied. Curtain straightened so the air forgets it was moved. If the city asked for order, the house has given it. Taxable, inspectable, quiet. Desire entered, paid, departed. The corridor translated what needed translating and kept the rest as rumor. That is a service, whether or not anyone calls it one. Stand once more where to doors teach one lesson. The front remembers names, the back forgets them. A corner that was law becomes just masonry again. The ledger climbs back into a head, a hidden scrap, a habit. The paint returns to outline. The hands that proved it correct return to themselves. None of it is triumph. None of it is tragedy. It is a competence that has learned to fold itself small, the better to last. Outside, the lane returns to generalities, ash, market dust, shutters, the leftover words of the forum gently losing their edges. Inside, exactness cools into readiness. Floors that can still be read by feet if lamps fail. Air that can still be warmed by one good breath. Walls that will still speak clearly once flame returns. Continuation is the most honest promise made here, and it is kept. If a prayer belongs anywhere, it is a maintenance request. Keep the lamp from spilling. Keep the coin from failing. Keep the wrong knock from arriving at the wrong time. The niche understands and says nothing. The gods of this street accept offerings that look like preparation. A jar set where it can't be kicked. A cloth folded where a sleepy hand will find it. A door that can breathe on cue. The weight does not leave. It learns its place in wrists and knees, and the span between shoulder and jaw. In a voice calibrated to pass beneath plaster's hearing. In a name polished by mouths that never take it home. It is not noble and does not wish to be. It is ordinary life, carried correctly. That correctness is the dignity available, and it is real. Tomorrow is already here in small pieces. A draft turns toward the back because it always does. The first coin of the next day warms in a palm that knows both its sound and its subtraction. The jar leans toward the fountain with the confidence of a road that knows itself. Repetition is not an enemy when it is also a craft. The craft is survival. Breathe once more with the lamps out. The corridor holds the dark the way a bowl holds water, steadily, without spilling. Stone deletes faces and keeps positions so the rooms can be new again, without lying about their past. The soot bouquet above is black and patient. It will remember what needs to be remembered so that the body may forget long enough to rest. Step back to the sill and let the night decide what to keep. The doorway is smaller than it felt, which is how necessary places protect themselves. The city goes on behaving, and this house has helped it do so by keeping promises on time. That is not a small thing. Carry that thought the way a warmed cloth carries heat. Close, quiet, enough. If these quiet histories made the mind unclench, leave only a light footprint where the floor can't keep it. Perhaps a small like, a soft subscribe, the kind of nod the dark understands. And in the morning, if the hour asks again for competence, breath, and a hand on the lamp, remember, the plan is known, the tools are ready, and the night, for all its weight, has already begun to let go.